until about 2 weeks ago. It's been nearly 20 years since the last time I lifted any weights. Like on a regular basis, like on purpose to get stronger. That might not be obvious, but the last time I went to a gym, more than once in a single month, was during a weightlifting class back in college. The class ended, and so did my weightlifting career. Occasionally, my dad would convince me to go work out with him, but that might be a couple times a year. And he even bought Jane and me a super cheap membership to a gym many, many years ago that I never used and that we eventually let expire. And here's like the crazy thing about this. About 10 years ago, I came across a running resource. Many of you know that running is my obsession, called Strength Running. And over the last 10 years, I've read almost everything, every newsletter this guy has sent out. I've listened to almost every single podcast that he has published. And this guy basically has just one message. It's that if you want to be better, healthier, stronger runner, you just need to strength train. And for years, I've shared this resource with others. I've sold people that I run with on the importance of weight training, like they've actually started lifting. I've said multiple times, I would love to start lifting weights. I genuinely believe, like in my core, that weightlifting would be a good thing for me. And until about 2 weeks ago, I haven't been able to get myself to do it. I have so many great excuses. What does it mean to believe? What does it mean to believe? Like that is the question at the heart of our passage this morning. I mean, John says, this is why he wrote this book, this account of Jesus. He says, these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing, you may have life in his name. That's why this book was written, so that you might believe and have life in his name. But what does it mean to believe, right? This question comes front and center as Jesus meets Martha, another person who he loves. Right? Martha is not just some random lady, but she is a dear friend. And John introduces us to Martha, her sister Mary, and Lazarus by telling us, right now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And Jesus comes to this town called Bethany, where Lazarus and Martha and Mary live, because Lazarus has died. And as Jesus approaches the town, Martha hears that he's coming, and she runs out to meet him on the road. She is so glad that he is there. And they have this conversation, this back and forth about life and about death and about Jesus and about what Jesus plans to do. And Jesus looks at her and asks, do you believe this? And Martha responds, right? We just heard this. Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. Right? Did you notice what Martha says there? You are the Christ, the Son of God. This is the goal of John's whole gospel, that we would believe this very thing, right? So that believing we might have life. And here, Martha is presented as someone who believes the thing that we're all supposed to believe as well, the thing that will bring us life. But something's not quite right. Right? The story unfolds, and we start to notice something is wrong. Because Jesus, he comes to this tomb, the place where his friend Lazarus has been buried. and it's covered by a large stone. And there, Jesus just says to the group that's there, take away the stone. And there's this whole group there, but Martha, she responds, Lord, by this time, there will be an odor. He's been dead for 4 days. And notice what Jesus says to her. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? If you believed, Jesus says. Martha has in some way failed to believe. And so in this moment, she cannot see God's glory, at least not yet. But the weird thing about this, right, is that Martha just confessed a few verses earlier. She does believe. So how do we make sense of this? Especially because at the end of service today, 2 young ladies are going to get baptized. And they are going to stand up in front of us and confess what they believe. And we will also confess with them what we believe. And so this question hangs in the air. What does it mean to believe? I think Martha is struggling with the same tension that I live with. Matt, the director of strength running, was a successful runner who personally benefits from weightlifting. He's now a running coach who has seen massive success in his athletes who lift. He shares resources on a regular basis from physical therapists and physiologists. Physiologists? I don't think that's a word. Personal trainers, people with PhDs in, in athletic performance and physiology. There we go. That's what I was looking for. And kinesiology. And all of these people agree together that weightlifting is essential for performance and then just some basic health, especially I keep hearing in men 40 and older. And people like to keep reminding me that I am now one of those 40 and older men. I genuinely believe Matt. I believe his facts. I believe his advice. I believe all of it. I don't doubt a single thing he's saying. And yet, right, I'm really busy. I'm already struggling to balance family and work and running. I'm actually a little bit worried that I'll get hurt if I start lifting because I don't really know how to lift with proper form. It's been so long. And if I went to the gym, I wouldn't even know where to start. Start looking around going, I don't know, what are all these things? You recognize these, right? Some people might call them excuses, but actually they're all legitimate concerns, like Martha's. Right? We might not know how long it takes for a dead and decomposing body to start smelling. But Martha lived at a time when everyone was intimately aware of death and its smell. At that time, you didn't hire someone to come take care of your deceased family for you. You didn't hire somebody to prepare your family members for burial. It was you. Your family did these things for your family members. And so Martha knew, you better hurry because the smell is going to start. People who have smelled a decaying body often say that it's a smell that you can never unsmell. Has this way of staying with you. So Martha just sounds like she's talking out of personal experience, and it's practical, right? Losing her brother is bad enough. She doesn't now need to be haunted by the smell of his decomposition for the rest of her life. She knows the danger of opening that tomb, and yet Jesus has given her a command. Jesus has spoken to her to do something. Not just any Jesus, the Jesus that Martha just said she believes, the one who she believes is the Christ, the Son of God. This Jesus tells people what to do. And Martha, who he loves, in this moment does not do it because she has a legitimate concern. And this brings us, right, to the heart of belief, of what it means to believe. To believe something is not to simply agree with an idea in your head or in your heart, right? It's not enough to simply accept that, yeah, something is probably true. There's actually something more required from belief. And it's one of the reasons why the Greek word in the original translation is sometimes translated into English as trust. Just a little bit of a different connotation, right? Like you trust a person. You put your trust in a person when they tell you what to do, when they tell you to do something. Martha tells Jesus, I trust you, Jesus, that you are the Christ, the Son of God. But then in the next breath, when he tells her what to do, she has a reason to not do the thing he said. And Jesus names what this means. He just says, if you trust, you would see the glory of God. If you trust, you would see the glory of God. Even though she might be genuinely convinced that Jesus is who he said he is, she is not in this moment trusting him. And this lack of trust has consequences. Now, in this moment, they aren't severe consequences, right? Nobody is about to die because nobody else is about to die because of her lack of trust. God doesn't seem interested in punishing her because of her lack of trust. No, that's not what God is doing here. That's not what Jesus is up to. But the consequence is real. Because as long as she lacks trust, she cannot see what God is doing. And I want to sit there for just a minute. The glory of God is sort of an obvious point in this story, right? The glory of God to be seen is to see a dead man named Lazarus raised from the dead so that he's no longer dead. The story tells us that people will see Lazarus alive and they will follow after Jesus because of what they have seen God do. In this story, the glory of God is that Lazarus was dead, and now he is alive. Major. But at this moment, he's alive, but he's sealed away in the tomb. He's in the dark, hidden away. He's not visible to anyone, including Martha. There is actually only one way for Martha and the crowd that's with her to see what God has done. Right? So in this story, God has done the hard part. Right? He has actually finished the work, but now it's time for everyone else to get to enjoy God's work. Have you ever been part of a moment like this where somebody has invested such incredible work in something? It's funny, as I looked at Charm, I was thinking of some of your artwork and some of the things that you have unveiled. And there's this moment where it becomes public and we all see it and we all enjoy it. This is what's happening in this story. Have you had one of those moments where somebody did something incredible and powerful, but it's not until it's revealed and others get to see it that it is then enjoyed, that it makes an impact, a difference on other people? This is what we're witnessing here. It's time for everyone to enjoy God's work. And so he asks the people to trust him, to move a stone. Because, just practically, as long as the stone is in place, Lazarus is in the dark. God's power cannot be seen. But move the stone, and there is Lazarus, 4 days dead, ready to be called out, alive and on full display. I want to spend a weird amount of time on this stone because it has had me thinking and wondering all week. What are the stones that God is asking us to move so that we might see God's glory? Like, what are the stones that God is asking us to move so that, like, his power, his life, his light and love might be seen by our neighbors? I confess, I'm kind of obsessed with the stone because in this stone is such an easy task. Right? Like, it's not a stone that's so big that people can't move it. Right? Nobody goes, oh, too big, we can't do that. No, they assume that they can move this stone. It's just a stone that needs to be moved. And so moving the stone isn't going to impress anybody. Nobody's going to get any glory for moving the stone. But the stone is moved so that the world can see what God has done, so that the world can see behind the stone. I think that this is such an amazing picture of what God is calling us to. Like, I don't know about you, but I have zero sense that God is calling me to raise dead people to life. I don't think that that's part of my calling. It's not my job. But every day, God is raising those who are spiritually dead to new life. In fact, this is one of the themes that's at work in this passage, right? That there are these two different kinds of life and death, that there is a physical death that we know intimately as we lose people that we love and that we grieve. And even Jesus in this passage weeps when he encounters the death that is so real and profound and feels like an enemy that comes against us. There is a physical death, but Jesus also makes clear there is a kind of life that can overcome physical death forever. And right now, even though we all will die, there is a kind of transformation that is taking place in people who put their trust in Jesus, where it is so obvious that they have become new people. Can you just think of somebody right now? Who is somebody in your life? Who is somebody that you know of who, putting their trust in Jesus, they became a new person? I recognize that it's not my job to raise people from their graves. And it's actually also not my job to raise people from their spiritual death. If this passage tells us anything, it is that this is the work of our God. This is the work of our Father. It is a work of the Holy Spirit. It is the work of Jesus, who is the life and the resurrection. When people are raised to new life, what we are seeing is a work of God. This is the power of God at work in our world. And most of the time, we are asked to do nothing more than to make visible what God is doing in hidden places, so that formerly dead women and men can walk out of their tombs when Jesus calls their name, so that they might be seen by all and God glorified. Because as people see these formerly dead people, those whose lives had been destroyed by their spiritual death, as they walk out with new life, as they walk out with a new kind of love, as they walk out with a new kind of light, more and more people will see and they will believe and they will see the God who raises the dead, and they might let this God raise them as well. For Martha, to believe was to move the stone so that everyone could see God's glory through Lazarus. And I wonder, what is it that Jesus is asking us to do? What is it that requires a little bit of trust, but that maybe is totally doable? That if we would just trust Jesus and do it, would make God's glory visible to our neighbors. I don't want to just believe. I want Jesus to send me as the Father sent him. One of the ways that we trust Jesus and we follow him is when he says, "As I have done for you, so you do for others." And I can't wait for next week when we get to hear Allie talk a little bit more about what that looks like. But in another way, we're going to get to celebrate with two young women, Priel and Jasmine, this morning, as they respond to Jesus in obedience, as they let God's light shine in and through them, as they say yes to him, as they are baptized. And then in another way, as we gather around the table this morning, as we eat the bread and we drink from the cup, we proclaim Jesus' death in a beautiful way that says, who is our God and what is our God like? Well, our God is love. And he loved the world so much that he gave his only Son, so that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life.